We are currently seeking sealed bids for general services and materials for the sewer division of the DPW, as well as for on-call emergency services for that same division. Bids for both are generally issued every 3 years, and the town enters into a 3-year contract for those services. The existing contracts will expire at the end of this fiscal year. Bid documents for those that are interested can be found beginning this Wednesday on the town's website, with bids due on April 2nd. On Thursday, similarly, we'll open bids for the Highway Division's General Materials and Services contract. Similar to the Sewer Division, these are regular bids that we issue generally every 3 years, with contracts for up to 3 years. Doing contracts for up to 3 years allows us to lock in favorable pricing. It's important to note that in all of those contracts, it's the town's sole discretion whether or not to extend. So it doesn't happen often, but it has happened in the past where maybe we locked in less than favorable rates, and we knew there was a downturn in costs, and so we rejected the bids and went back out. But generally speaking, this gives us the ability to know what our costs will be 3 years in advance. Next week, we'll issue a request for proposals for engineering services for the sewer division. This is also a 3-year contract, and the selected firm plays a big role in helping design and plan future sewer projects and capital improvements. Because it's a request for proposals as opposed to an invitation for bids, we'll work with the division staff and members of the sewer commission to review the proposals and award a contract to the firm that is the most advantageous for the town. Last week, we canceled the invitation for bid for the demo and abatement of 180 Lakeview Ave, which is the former Council on Aging building. As you might remember, a prior town meeting, I think May of 2024, authorized the use of free cash and some funding that was already approved by the select board to demolish the building. We would pave over where the building is to expand parking for that softball field. Recently, the Department of Environmental Protection regulations here in Massachusetts changed, and although that is a very small building, because it's not a residential building, before we can issue the IFB, we have to have our own consultant identify the specific hazard. So when the pipe burst almost 3 years ago now, we knew that the tile flooring contained asbestos and the mastic underneath it also did. As a part of these new regulations, we have to identify if there's lead paint anywhere in the building. We have to test the asphalt shingles. So it'll add about 2 weeks onto our process, and then we'll reissue the invitation for bids. One of the things that we'll be careful on is when we award a contract, the awarded contractor will have to work their schedule around the schedule of those softball fields, because obviously we don't want an active construction site while we're taking down the building. And again, that's from an existing authorization, $60,000 that was approved by town meeting, and roughly $40,000 that was previously approved for abatement by this board using the American Rescue Plan Act funds. From a project perspective, the Affordable Housing Trust met 2 weeks ago to review the final draft of the housing production plan. They provided feedback, which we're working to incorporate into the final plan, which will be presented to the Select Board at its meeting on the 24th, and then the Planning Board at its meeting on April 3rd. Both boards have to vote favorably to accept the housing production plan. Our Recreation Director, DPW Superintendent, and my office have been working closely together to get the final details arranged for the Ironwood Park grand opening. As we've discussed before, the Recreation Committee will host a grand opening in conjunction with our annual Health and Safety Fair on Saturday, June 7th. In the next couple of weeks, Ray Contracting will mobilize to begin the site work that's necessary for the installation of the pavilion, and Sunshine Construction will be back on site to put the finishing touches on the various sport courts. We'll also start to see the delivery of the various site furnishings, including benches, picnic tables, trash barrels, signage, and more. And again, for those that aren't familiar, the land there was donated by Toll Brothers as a part of that development agreement, and all of the funding that we're using to design this was approved first by CPC and then town meeting in 2 different allotments. Attached to my town manager's report this evening and included in the packet that was posted online is the final conceptual study report for a new fire station on the Winslow School parcel. You'll note that for the purposes of this study, it assumed that we would build a building that matched the program assessment that we had done last year, which assumed a build that would meet the department's needs 30 years down the road. With that in mind, the conceptual study assumes that the building is constructed in place of the existing Winslow School, but as I've said before, and I'll say again tonight, that exact same plan could be put elsewhere on the site should town meeting vote to allocate additional CPC funds to preserve the original schoolhouse. So nothing about this plan requires that the Winslow School comes down. I think obviously empty land is much more easy to build on, but it certainly could be accommodated if the will of the town is to preserve the Winslow School. So based on the conceptual plan, which again is if we were going to build a building that meets our needs 30 years out, you're looking at a $19 million building. That number will come down as we go through the schematic design phase, which is what you'll see later on the town meeting warrant. We'll be asking town meeting for funding to get to the schematic design phase. Once we have the schematic design done, we'll iron out a lot of the details about the building. There will be some items that were included in the conceptual plan that will likely come out of the building to better match our needs. And we'll have a better idea of what that dollar amount for construction is so that we would be prepared to go to town meeting for construction funding when we get to that point. Chief Russell, of course, has been a part of these conversations, has reviewed the conceptual study plan, and again, for those that are interested in looking at it, it is posted with the meeting packet online, but of course, our office can provide a copy if folks just want to reach out directly. On the DPW, and I should note that I expect the schematic design to range from about $150,000 to $250,000. On the DPW front, Superintendent Jake Zwicker and I have been working with a few different contractors to identify the best approach to getting the new DPW building constructed. As the board will remember, we have $450,000 allocated in ARPA funds and a commitment of 30% of the total cost from the Sewer Enterprise Fund, because that building will house both our Highway Division and the Sewer Division as well. We originally issued an invitation for bids for the construction of just the shell last fall, but the cost exceeded our budget. We're in a bit of a chicken and an egg situation because we have an earmark in the Economic Development Bond Bill that was approved by the legislature and signed by the governor. That's $600,000, which obviously is a substantial amount of money. However, as I've told this board before, the way the bond bills work is even though the legislature got it included, the governor ultimately has to release the funds through her capital plan. We won't know what is included in the fiscal 26 capital plan until probably June, so it's not guaranteed money right now. It also is authorized for up to 5 years. So if the governor chooses to not include it in fiscal 26, it's possible that it could be released in fiscal 27. So we're really balancing not waiting so long that the ARPA funds run out, because those have to be expended by December of 2026, but also not giving up hope that that $600,000 will come to the town. In the next couple of weeks, we'll settle on next steps, which might entail constructing just the garage bays now, with plans to renovate the existing building using that $600,000 earmark to expand the office, administrative area, locker room, break room, etc. On a staffing perspective, I'm happy to share that we've posted the assistant town manager position. Interested applicants can visit tyngsborough.ma.gov to download the posting and the job description. I've worked with our senior leadership team to tweak the description and share that with the board to match the needs of our department now and complement the existing skill set in our office. I imagine that in the next month we'll start reviewing applications. We'll do 2 panel interviews with a bunch of different department heads. So it is likely that we wouldn't fill that position until end of May, early June, which is fine. But I do hope to have that position filled by the beginning of the fiscal year. And then I'd like to congratulate Sergeant Dennis Leach, who was promoted to the rank of Detective Sergeant by Chief Woods earlier this month. Sergeant Leach has been with the town of Tyngsborough since 2014, when he began his career as a reserve officer. In 2016, he was hired as a full-time officer and promoted to sergeant in 2022. Sergeant Leach has served as a field training officer, is a member of our NEMLEC regional response team, and worked to establish the department's first peer support program. Additionally, Sergeant Leach has received a handful of awards, including the Massachusetts Police Association's Medal of Valor in 2017, the Tyngsborough Police Department's Medal of Honor in 2017, and the Tyngsborough Police Department's Life Saving Award in 2023. In this new role, he'll assist our criminal division with investigations, firearms licensing, and more, which is currently supervised by recently promoted Lieutenant Cindy Shea. And then just a couple of reminders for upcoming events. The Recreation Committee will host its annual Shamrock Ball on March 15th at Tyngsborough Elementary School. Tickets are limited, but I believe as of today there were still a few left, so you can learn about purchasing them at tyngsborough.ma.gov. The deadline to pull nomination papers to run for office in the upcoming annual town election is April 1st, 2025. Nomination papers can be obtained in the office of the town clerk and must be returned to that same office by April 15th. The annual town election is on Tuesday, May 20th. Tonight, we'll take a look at the first draft of the annual town meeting warrant. Residents can visit the warrant in the packet posted online or by visiting the town meeting page on tyngsborough.ma.gov. Over the next couple of days, as we do every year, we'll start posting the draft language for each warrant article on the town meeting page. Just a note that it won't be final until this board votes to post it on April 7th. As you've seen with the iterations of the budget, these things start to shake out, but I've always found that it's better to put as much information out as you can in the beginning, and we'll start to tweak it. But the actual town meeting will be on Tuesday, May 6th, 7 p.m. at Tyngsborough Elementary School. And 1 week earlier, I think it's the 29th, 6 p.m. in this room, we'll host pre-town meeting, which is just an opportunity to informally ask questions about the warrant. There's no votes taken, there's no debate, but I think that residents have found that as a helpful avenue to get their information before town meeting. And then finally, just a reminder that we're hosting our annual budget office hours again on 3 dates in April. April 7th at 1 p.m. at the Center for Active Living, April 16th at 5 p.m. virtual, and April 23rd at 6:30 p.m. here in this room at Town Hall. And similar to pre-town meeting, this is an opportunity for residents to learn more about the municipal budget, ask whatever questions they'd like, and as always, if those 3 dates don't work for residents, happy to schedule something at a time that is convenient. That's all I got this evening, Mr. Chair.
That's it?
That's it.
An awful lot. Why don't we start over to my right with Mr. Cohen.
No question.
Select Person Gilfus.
Thank you, sir. A couple questions. The services that are being procured, could you describe what that means for me and the general public?
So under Massachusetts law, municipalities can't just call a vendor and say, hey, I need this done. There are spending thresholds that trigger under 30B, which is your most common procurement law, basically designed back in the 90s to prevent government bodies, except the executive branch, from pushing contracts to family and friends. So for these ones, we're doing an invitation for bid, which means that we put together a comprehensive document that says everything we're looking for, the quantity or the amount of service, estimated hours. We advertise it in the state's procurement systems, which is the Central Register and Combis. Vendors that regularly provide these services register for that. So when you post something about road paving, Colin's Paving Service is probably subscribed to it. They get an alert. We also advertise it in the Lowell Sun and on the town's website. When we get the bids in, which have to be out for at least 2 weeks, we generally do a month just because it gives people more time. We have to award the contract to the vendor offering the services at the lowest cost, so long as they meet our minimum qualifications. So if we, for instance, we have the on-call services, which deals with repairing pump stations and emergencies for a sewer department, we require that you have at least 5 years of experience. So if we have 3 companies, all have 5 years of experience, and Mike's Sewer Services is the lowest hourly rate, the law says we award it to Mike's Sewer Services. And we do this, we spend a lot of money, obviously. A lot of the money that we spend is through procured projects. When we put out a roads project, it's competitively procured. You have to open the bids in a public setting, so you announce the date and time. It's very formal. 2 people from the town read the bids out loud so that bidders can take down the information. And even if you're not a vendor, if you're just curious, anyone can obtain the bid docs from the town's website. If you go to tyngsboroughma.gov, how do I click bids and RFPs? Procurement is a very interesting concept that's unique to Massachusetts. It does sometimes help us get the best price, but sometimes it adds to the cost.
And we're required to go with the lowest price that meets our needs, even if they may not be the best fit for us. For example, Mike's Sewer Service is the lowest, but Ron's Sewer Service is a little bit more expensive, but Ron's charismatic and seems to be like the right, so easy to work with, and
you would find yourself in a bid protest situation with a very upset Attorney General. There are very limited circumstances where you can reject a bid, and so a great example is if I hired Mike's Sewer Services last time, and Mike's Sewer Services were not responsive, routinely lied about work they performed. As long as the town has documented that, we could, in subsequent bids, reject him as non-responsive. And when he files a bid protest with the Attorney General's office bid unit, we would have some sort of documentation to prove it. So, yes and no. On bigger purchases, I mentioned RFPs. I'm giving way too much information here, but I'm happy to sit down with anyone and talk about procurement. RFPs are slightly different. There are only certain types of services you can use a request for proposals. When you do that, you are not required to award it to the lowest offerer. You're required to award it to the vendor offering the most advantageous proposal, which can take into consideration things like knowledge of the community, written references, even if their prices are higher.
So
But
only
you can't do that
some
for most things.
services
Correct.
are allowed to go to RFP.
Correct. Like you couldn't do an RFP for paving, for instance. That's straightforward, invitation for bid. You've got to award it to the responsive, responsible bidder offering the lowest price.
I very much appreciate that clarification.
Absolutely.
A point that is not a question for you, just to point out, I know that there had been concerns from some residents about the picnic tables, the benches, the like stuff at Ironwood. So thank you for pointing out that those are being delivered. And then for the conceptual study for the fire station, I would feel more comfortable not assuming that we are going to tear down Winslow. I know that you have made it very clear that it would work either way. Is it possible for us to get a rendering of what the design would look like on the other part of the land?
We have expended the authorization that I had from this group, from the select board with the architects. I can find out. I can't imagine it's a lot of money.
I'm just curious, like, in order for them to tell us that it would work, they probably had like some sketch of how it would look.
We
I'm
had a work
curious.
session where we did measurements on the whole site. So I can reach out to them and ask them to provide something high level. I will note the Community Preservation Committee is meeting on March 20th, and they're hearing a request from the Historical Commission to reallocate that it's about 1.28 million that's left from the May 2023 town meeting to restore the outside of the building. CPC is not the final say. They just decide what goes to town meeting, and then ultimately town meeting has to decide. The message I have given to CPC and Historical is, again, we need to get to a schematic design point before we can construct a building anyway. So it's not like if town meeting in May says, yes, you can have up to $250,000 for a schematic design, because we know we can move it elsewhere on the site, they're not signing the fate of the Winslow School. So if folks need additional information or aren't ready to make that decision, there's no rush. But I can certainly see about getting a rendering of some sort.
Yeah, I think I don't want to inadvertently put in people's minds that, like, when they see this design, that is the vision. I want them to be able to have sort of a neutral perspective to the best of our ability.
You got it.
Cool. Thank you. That's it.
Mr. Schneider?
Thank you. Colin, just had a question on the DPW building. I know at one time we wanted to build the shell, and understanding that there's money being held up by the governor, and we don't know when that will happen, but now it looks like we've shifted a bit to say, okay, we'll build the bays and we'll renovate the building, the existing building. But if the money does come through, say even if it's June, because that's only a few months away, might we still go back to building the shell of the building, or do we think that rehabilitating the existing building is a better option for us?
It's a great question. I can't tell you definitively one way or another. What I know is when this project was first conceived, I was here, I worked on the capital plan with it, I wasn't the town manager at the time. The two things we were really trying to address is we still have a lot of equipment at the DPW that are stored outside.
Right.
We are able to squeeze all of our six-wheel dump trucks, those are the big trucks you see in the winter, inside. But because of the constraints on the highway building, they have to take the plows off outside. So if you ever drive around the building, you can see the plows are outside. None of our one-ton trucks fit inside. So we were trying to address equipment space and the fact that there's inadequate office space, there's inadequate locker rooms. We did get a $100,000 earmark 2 years ago, which we're using to renovate the bathrooms in there. That came directly from the state through Senator Kennedy's office. So we're making some progress. We also needed to accommodate the sewer commission. The whole point was to combine us. So in a perfect world, I think the original plan when I took over in September 2023 was that we would do the shell, we would focus on building out the 5 garage bays, 3 for the highway division, 2 for sewer, and then we would figure out, once the money became available, the office space, and the goal was to centralize all of our DPW staff in one building. Right now, the highway foreman and the DPW admin are in that building, the sewer foreman is in a rented building, and the sewer administrator and the DPW superintendent are in this building. What I've said is, while we could continue to wait for that $600,000, which is no guarantee, and in full transparency, we've made it twice in the last 7 years into a bond bill, and one time we received a part of the funding. So, there's certainly no guarantees. What I've said to the DPW superintendent and the sewer staff and our consultants is, if we need to address a space issue and get the sewer department out of a rented building, which every year the owner of that building says they're looking to sell, we can accomplish that by building a steel building simply for storage. It would get all of our equipment out of the elements. Down the road, we could add heat to the building if necessary, but it's not, and we've toured a few area DPW buildings that do this. And then if the $600,000 becomes available, without waiting and potentially losing that ARPA funds and having to return it to the federal government, we could use that 600 to renovate the existing admin area. And because we would have constructed those 5 new bays, we could give up one of the bays in the existing building for real locker room space. I mean, right now, if you've ever been in that building, their lockers are in one of the bays next to the 6-wheel dump trucks. It's certainly not suitable, and we're just trying to maximize the fact that we have outside funding sources, not within the operating budget, to spend it. So I think ideally we'd have a brand new separate building, but if we can accomplish the original goals without having to use the operating budget and without losing money back to the federal government, I think that my perspective is that's the best approach at this time.
All right, good, thank you. Yeah, makes sense. Any other questions? No? Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes, so thank you, Colin. The Affordable Housing Trust, question I just want clarity on is the Toll Brothers affordable housing that they're building on the corner.
Yep.
When does that go on the availability for inventory?
It is already included on our
So is it
on our roster.
in the process of now being rented out or
Yes.
sold? And
My understanding is they're all rentals, which is great
Okay,
for our SHI, even though only 25% of them are reserved for affordable. Under the state's guidelines, any building that has at least 25% affordable and is 100% rental counts toward our SHI. The SHI is the subsidized housing inventory. That number, Tyngsborough is really good. We're at 10.8%. Anything below 10, you run the risk of what our neighbors in Drake are dealing with unfriendly 40Bs, where your local zoning
right.
kind of gets trumped. So it's positive because it helps that number. You're able to add buildings to that as soon as they pull a building permit. So we were actually able to add those 16 units last May at this time.
Okay.
And my understanding is one building is already fully rented out and people are actually living in there. That's the one
Fantastic.
closest to Coburn. The one closest to Toll Brothers is fully rented out, and I believe April 15th is the move-in date for those.
I just, yeah, 'cause I saw the activity there and I just wanted to.
And if I could, I had the pleasure of being the person that drew the lottery for the folks that are in those units. So it was really lovely to be a part of that and to meet some of the families that are going to live there.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
great. The fire department study, maybe a little clash here with one of the members, but I'm on the opposite view where I would love to see the entire site gone and a firehouse put there. And I think there may be some constraints where if they move things, how do you do the entry, ingress and egress and all that stuff. So that, I think, I'm very considerate of that viewpoint, where if it's possible, yeah, but I think there might be some kerfuffle with having to meet the laws of, because they're a big equipment. It's not just like you and me hanging around in our cars or SUV, it's a honk honk, a big truck. And so I think that that's probably the consideration from where you see that big driveway, and then you have it's a beautiful design, but it's, entry, exit, and stuff like that. So that might be something that,
I think when we see it on paper, it'll be like, oh, that doesn't quite
yeah.
make sense.
But I
Yeah.
think it's a really good thing to ask Colin for that. But I just want to set expectations. They may come back with all these other ideas on that. The third piece I have about the Ironwood, you said June 7th,
Yes.
and we think that pavilion will be like, woo, built
It
in
will
there?
definitely be built.
And all that goodness?
Yes. They're mobilizing. Actually, the contractor was on site at the end of last week to get familiar with where it's going. Our expectation and what we've, hopefully he's not watching, we lied and said that the grand opening was 2 weeks earlier. So they're working with a fake deadline to make sure that it's done on time. So I'm confident. I don't think they're watching.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway.
If they are, I've just tipped my hat, but
second,
it's
I'll
fine.
make sure.
It's okay. So I don't want to be the culprit of that. That was you, not me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. He did it. I mean, so that's great. And then where can people, if, people wanted to, as part of that celebration, will the rec committee be running something where local bands or somebody can perform music or something like that? Is that an obvious thing, or are they going to already organize something like that?
It's definitely not an obvious thing. It's a great question. I'm not sure. I can check with them, and certainly I'll have them updated. They've been advertising it quite a bit on their social media and their page. I will have them add information if they're looking for local artists or people to perform. I know they're doing it in conjunction with the annual health and safety fair. So I think that the focus for the rec side, they'll have people to help teach like pickleball and some of the sporting things over there. I don't know if they have live music plans, but I can check.
I feel a pickleball tournament in Ron Schneider's future.
Yes.
I challenge you. No. Anyways, you had a question?
Are you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Back to you.
One other question, Colin, on Ironwood.
Yes.
So I walked the property late last fall, and it's such a beautiful piece of property. But seeing that, you know, with the pickleball and the shuffleboard and volleyball and whatnot, they're all what I would consider sort of adult sporting items.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any plans to put any type of limited playground equipment on that property so that when somebody, if somebody's there to go play pickleball, that there's something for their children to do while they're busy?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
What I will say is that I think, and I was not part of the working group or in any of the rec committee meetings, I think that there was this general sense that what we lacked in town was, and I say adult amenities, but certainly a teenager could play pickleball and there are basketball.
Yeah.
We did spend, using ARPA funds, like $460, almost $500,000 renovating playgrounds at the elementary school.
Yeah.
And there is some limited playground equipment at Wiccassee and also at the town beach. I think that what the focus was when they were considering this parcel was expanding it beyond swing sets and slides and giving something that more people can use. Now, I certainly can't rule out future additions to the site, but what I can say is the money that was granted by CPC in town meeting is completely spoken for under this
Yep.
current allotment. And I think, again, I'm calling them adult amenities, but certainly
Yeah.
all kinds of young folks play a lot of the games that are over there, volleyball, basketball, and even pickleball.
That's fine. Yeah, no, I agree. I just, perhaps someplace down the road, we may consider some limited amount of playground equipment so that, like I say, when the adults are busy playing, the children have something to do also while they're there. So it becomes a real family area.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Fun for all ages.
Exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth.
As always, thank you for the expansive and detailed update. Lots of things happening. It is springtime. We looked out today, and the sun was out, and it was a little bit warm. So it's great to see some of these things starting to come to fruition, because I think there's a lot of good things planned, and a lot of good things happening on that. I don't have any other questions. Just thank you for the update. And for all of those residents, there will be an update online for this on social media, and I encourage you all to stay up to date on these. And if I'm not mistaken, they can sign up for the updates on the website and have things sent to their email.
Absolutely.
I want to remind people, because some people say, oh, I don't know what's going on. Well, there is a way to get some of that information. And while we certainly welcome them to watch our meetings and follow it diligently, I think that there are other mechanisms.